Hey guys, I hope everyone's doing really good. It's Go Do Your Own Research. And tonight I'm going to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein. What a lovely way to spend your Saturday. No, it's only going to be a quick one tonight. I just wanted to cover this because I don't see a lot of people talking about it. And I'm like, well, it's not like me to talk about something that's not popular on YouTube. But yeah, I think it's a really important piece of information that's come out. Obviously, I've spent quite a lot of time looking through the Epstein files. I have made quite a few videos about some of my findings, and I also read Virginia Roberts Giuffre's book cover to cover on this channel, where she talked about this incident of him dying in prison or jail. I'm not sure what they call it. I think it's like called an inmate facility. So yeah, that's why I wanted to make a live stream about it. And like I said, it's going to be a quick one. But let me first of all start by sharing my screen, which is okay. So this is my search results when I put Jeffrey Epstein. So I've got to be careful with the wording as well. Obviously, YouTube is very sensitive to talking about these topics, which might be another reason why this isn't getting a lot of coverage. But basically, he took his own life. That was the official story we heard in 2019. And 3 days ago, NBC News reported new details in Jeffrey Epstein's death. So they said there are new details in the death of Jeffrey Epstein. The New York Times conducted an exclusive investigation and revealed ... Okay? So there has been a bit of an ongoing conspiracy theory, well, quite a few conspiracy theories, that he did not take his own life, that someone killed him. And a lot of people were looking at Donald Trump for obvious reasons. But to be honest with you, it's going to sound really weird, but the more I hear about the Epstein files and the more that comes out, the less I feel like Donald Trump was implicated in the files. I know they've redacted a lot of stuff with his name in it. I know that. But I feel like Jeffrey Epstein genuinely thought he could use his name as leverage to bargain his way out. And then I think he was sort of realizing that weren't going to be on the cards. That's just me purely speculating. But like I said, I have looked into it quite a bit. And obviously I am no fan of Trump. Okay, we've got some comments. 1 second. I just have to turn my camera off so I can read them. Becky Louise, hey, put you up. It's too hot down south in Aylesbury, just outside London. Hope you're well. I know, I'm baking as well. I've got the window open. I just had to close it a little bit because I'm like, I have to really shout because I want to make sure you can hear me. Hello from Florida. Hi, Alfia. Good to see you again. Yeah, I think we've got Florida weather going on right now in London. Okay, well, I'm really glad you could make it and I'm not having to do this on my own because I genuinely didn't think anyone was going to show up for this one. Right, let's get back to the The YouTube search. Right. So yeah, new details in Jeffrey Epstein's death. I've got to be really careful as well, guys, because I keep playing these videos on my live stream and you're not really allowed to. So I'm just going to sort of like paraphrase, but this is the big story that has just come out. It's actually on a podcast. And so what I'm going to do is, I know it's a bit naughty, but I found a transcript of the podcast. So I'm actually going to read it so you can all hear what they found out, because these people have done an actual investigation. It's like, this ain't no joke. They've put the work in, which I know a lot of people on YouTube say they do investigations, but they're pretty superficial compared to what they did here. So yeah, this is when his death was first announced 6 years ago. Jeffrey Epstein, was it 6 years ago? I thought it was 7 years ago. Jeffrey Epstein found dead from apparent today. So what I want you to take note of as well, this is another reason why I'm talking about this, is you can really see the channels that have been pushing the theory that his life was taken by someone else, by an assassin, basically. I mean, recently it's gone even more crazy than that. We've got a lot of people saying he's still alive. I'm going to show you the comments on one of these videos because I was like, this is insane. I don't know if it's genuine or if it's astroturfing or if it's a bit of both, but not one person was questioning the contents of the video. Saying that his body's been swapped over, a lot of different stuff. You know me, I like to look at everything that has been researched and investigated and reported and then kind of leave it up for general discussion. But, at the same time, I like to point out where I feel like people are blatantly taking advantage of stories, because all of these channels will have you believe that they support the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. That's what they want you to believe. But when you see that, you're like, when you think about it, it's like, okay, so if that's the case, I don't know why you're not reporting on this. Why are you siding with his brother who's been pushing this theory that his life was taken, when the reality is this guy, it looks like he did take his own life, he's just a blatant coward at the end of the day. He didn't want to face the music, and he just, well, I'm not going to give too much away. So obviously we've got like Joe Rogan, obviously one of the biggest conspiracy theory channels, more on the right side. Joe Rogan Investigates 1 year ago, suicidal murder. That's a short of the one I just showed. Okay, so this is one of these like spam channels, yeah, that we've seen come up in the Blake Lively case, where it's like someone puts this stuff out. They're like AI generated, so they'll just regurgitate talking points for whatever side is feeding them this information. So obviously this says, what really happened the night Epstein hanged himself? New DOJ files expose gaps in the timeline. So this was 4 months ago. And I remember this time, you can see how many views it has. What's his name? Speaking of investigations, CoffeeZilla was covering this and it was getting millions of views. He had like the this CCTV footage, because that's what they were all saying, like, well, there was enough time for someone to go in the room, like, who is this shadowy figure? Well, the New York Times has done an investigation into all of that. And also this picture is very disturbing of him laying on the bed like that. I'm not sure if that's even real or where they got that picture from. I mean, it's just, who knows these days, do you know what I mean? But he doesn't look very good in it. I'll say that. Look. I don't feel bad laughing. Oh, I've still got my camera off, actually. You've heard all the theories, yeah. I know. I've been following it very closely. Actually, one of these channels, yeah, let me just show you. I did like them until this. I now find this to be a bit of a red flag with them because they're a bit upset that the New York Times has come out with this now. They're not reporting it very well. Right. Another one, Jeffrey Epstein dies by suicide. Jail cell videos, concerns arise over video showing night of his death. So a lot of people were talking about the video. Okay, so then a month ago, this suicide note came out, yeah? So I understand that it was actually the New York Times, or was it CNN? It was one of them that did an information request to get that note unsealed. Or, yeah, did I say that? A FOIA request. Because, oh, yeah, it was sealed because the guy who he was sharing a cell with, a genuine murderer, said that he found it in a notebook and it was sealed because he had his case going on. So that's why we couldn't get access to it sooner, just to clear that one up. So then I saw this like weird cartoon thing. Like, what the hell? That has 1.4 million views. It's so weird. I mean, I'm not saying 1.4 million people believe it, but do you know what I mean? Like, these things influence people's thinking whether they want to admit it or not. Okay, so then we're getting to the hardcore ones now. So we've got like News Nation. There's no way Epstein killed himself. Former inmate held in same cell. So I obviously saw this and I was like, I was being open-minded. I was thinking, well, yeah, this guy was a Trump supporter, I think, quite rampant, which obviously this channel is on that side. And obviously Epstein hated Trump and Trump had expressed his dislike for Epstein. So, I mean, there was some merit to the theory that he had been placed in there deliberately. But there's a big but. I'm not going to rule out that this guy could quite easily have been offered an incentive to say this stuff. I mean, look, we are dealing with the most powerful rich people in the world who it's in their interest, including Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer and accountant who have already done their depositions. You know, they're still handling his estate, which some people have said this is a conflict of interest. I completely agree, but who am I? Just a random person on YouTube. So we had autopsy results of Jeffrey Epstein revealed 6 years ago. 1 month ago, Epstein's alleged suicide note released by court order. So, yeah, breaking news. Court orders release of Epstein's suicide note. That's the same thing. New details revealed. Some shorts. So we've got obviously 60 Minutes. Did Jeffrey Epstein die by homicide or suicide? 6 years ago, that was. That looks like Virginia's lawyer, I think. Inside Edition. Okay, so this is the channel that I have been watching, yeah, because they're the ones that have been really pushing this story that was put out. The reason why I was skeptical is because it's his brother that has been pushing out this story, yeah, Mark Epstein. And I think Mark Epstein has been really let off. Like, he was fully a co-conspirator with Epstein. There's just no doubt. You know, half of this stuff was going on in properties that he owned. I don't know if he still has a vested interest in Jeffrey Epstein's estate, but it just seems pretty likely. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I was a bit surprised how hard these guys were going about this story, because I'm like, this doesn't seem very integral reporting here, because I this channel, so it's called Status Quo News, yeah. Their like tagline is, we covering what the corporate media covers up. I think it's really funny. But they do a lot of like going out to protests and reporting from scenes of like disasters. Like, I've been watching their channel for years and they're pretty good, but recently they've just gone a bit crazy with these sort of anti-Trump conspiracies, because I really think that's what this is about. So they put out this video 17 hours ago saying they can't let it go. And I was like, are you sure they can't let this go, or you can't let this go? Because you've been covering this hard. And they're sort of like trying to discredit the New York Times, which I'm a bit like, okay. Sure thing. There's one more I wanted to quickly show you. Oh, so we've got the Sun newspaper, obviously. Sensationalist. 5 unanswered questions in Epstein's death, from murder claims to mystery figure entering cell. Yeah, so 3 days ago, Status Quo News did a breaking New York Times confirms they lied about Epstein's suicide, right? So I think he's done this because he's got to cover his ass, because he's put his full channel behind this story. And it's interesting because that one got 53,000, but the one he's put out yesterday is only on 5,000 views, which makes me feel I'm not going to get any views. But I watched the beginning, but I'm like, I don't know if I should play it to you, because I don't want them giving me a copyright claim or strike, even though they are meant to be anti-corporate. But I just had a quick look. Wait, sorry, I've lost it. Where was it? I had a quick look at what they were saying, and they were sort of like, yeah, they were trying to undermine what the New York Times had said, I guess, because they don't want to look stupid themselves. But their first point when I clicked on the video was, why have they used the word death? That just shows they're not making a big enough deal about it. Well, I've used the word death because the S word is kind of like a red alarm. It sends an alarm to YouTube, like, you know, you might get your video like set to over 18s, or made sort of like to seem like it's they're not going to want to promote it, is basically what I'm saying. And they might give you a community note or something. Right, I've lost that video, so never mind. But yeah, that's what he was saying. Anyway, as I said, I don't want to be too long, so let me show you. I showed you, yeah, the New York Times podcast. So this is the actual website of it, yeah. So it's the New York Times, and this came out on June 18th, and it's the untold story of Jeffrey Epstein's death. The official account of how the sex trafficker died in prison generated suspicions inflamed by the release of tens of thousands of documents from investigations into his death. And then I wanted to show you who is behind. So this is a podcast as well, yeah, which I find interesting because, okay, it's not like a main headline. It's a podcast, so they are sort of like soft releasing it. But this is who it's by, Charles Homans. I am a reporter for the New York Times and the Times Magazine covering national politics. What I cover, I approach politics with an emphasis on the ideas and activism that inform our politics and are shaped by them. I joined the Times in 2014 and served as politics editor for the Times Magazine. Before that, I was executive editor of Atavist Magazine, an editor at Foreign Policy and the Washington Monthly, and a newspaper and public radio reporter in Washington, D.C. Blah, blah, blah. I've also written for The Atlantic, The Washington Post, The New Republic, Slate, The Economist, and other publications. In all the roles I've occupied at the Times, I've upheld the standards of integrity outlined in our ethical journalism handbook. This is important, yeah, because when we've been talking about journalism is corrupt, they're not giving us accurate reporting, which I agree with. Like, a lot of journalists is very biased towards capitalism, towards men. It's very misogynist in its approach. And then like these sort of like stereotypes of feminism make feminism look bad. But at least they have this framework which states that our reporters may not hold stock in the industries they cover or endorse products, that our sports reporters may not participate in sports gambling, that our political reporters may not contribute to politicians' campaigns. These are reasonable expectations for any reader to have of our journalists, and I strive to live up to them every day. I mean, that's what he says. I'm just saying. So I would like to see a YouTuber make claims like that. Sorry. I mean, because a lot of YouTube channels that say they're independent are actually owned by big corporations. Let me see what the chat's saying. You don't just get out them crime families, right? I mean, the guy's literally a mass murderer, and we're supposed to suddenly trust that he's a credible source. And also that channel News Nation, it's a bit like tabloid TV-esque. Our intelligence is insulted on a daily basis. Of course, Epstein is alive. Along with Michael Jackson. They're hidden away together on a secret island. Okay, let's get to... I don't know if I'm allowed to show you the transcript. I'll just show you the top. Okay. The untold story of Jeffrey Epstein's death. The official account of how the sex trafficker died in prison generated suspicions inflamed by the release of tens of thousands of documents from investigations into his death. Well, I'll have to put up something to cover this up. So maybe I'll put that. There we go. We can be looking at Status Quo News. Epstein's suicide just fell apart while I read the article. Okay. So it starts off, he's saying that Epstein has just flown in to New York from Paris and he's on his private plane. It's late afternoon, July 6th, 2019, and he's about to land at Teterboro Airport, which is, I think it's just outside of New Jersey. Obviously, Virginia spoke about it quite a bit. Oh, in New Jersey, duh, which is a small airport that's often used by wealthy people in New York for their private jets. He's making plans, including heading to his private island in the Caribbean. I bet he is. So his plane lands, and a couple of custom agents come onto the plane to check his passport, which apparently is normal for private planes. And then he's asked to go to the terminal, and so he follows them to the terminal. When he gets to the terminal, there's an FBI agent and an NYPD detective waiting for him, and he's told he's under arrest. Okay, so apparently he's really shocked. And in the car while they're driving to Manhattan, because he was locked up in that facility, which is opposite the SDNY courthouse. It's like a big sort of tower block building. But after this happened, that facility has been shut down. He asked them two questions. One, is this sex trafficking? And the other is this about underage? So he was taken that night to the Metropolitan Correctional Center, that's what it's called, the MCC, the big federal jail in Lower Manhattan. And he's only been there for a matter of hours when one of the employees who works there notices him and sees him looking distraught and sad and a little confused. So she thinks it's enough of a concern that she sits down to write an email to the jail staff. And she says, I think we need to get someone over from the psychology department to come and talk to him, just to be on the safe side and prevent any thoughts of taking his own life. So obviously this is someone who has a lot of experience of seeing what people's body language looks like, who noticed this on his first night. Sorry, I'm just reading. Okay, so he's having a conversation. So Charles is speaking, and now the other guy from the podcast, Michael Barbaro, is doing his little introduction. He said, I'm speaking to my colleague who takes us inside a major new investigation by the Times that tries to answer the question that refuses to go away. Did the world's most powerful and well-connected offender die by his own hand or by somebody else's? So the first question he asked is why at this stage in the story, which is 7 years after he died, when all eyes are on his network of friends and enablers, his victims, well, are they? I don't think they are. I think there's a lot of eyes on the victims, but as far as all eyes being on the friends and enablers, I don't think there's nearly enough eyes on them that I've noticed. It's definitely in the last couple of months been like trickling away to nothing. There's only literally a couple of channels that I know of that even still talk about it. All the politics around the release of the Epstein files. Why did you all undertake this inquiry right now? So Charles says, suspicions around his death have been very persistent from literally the time when the story broke back in 2019. People were very suspicious of the official story, which from the beginning was that he took his own life in the cell. And there's just a lot about the story that has not sat well with people ever since. True, because we never get the full story. Like, none of the authorities are transparent. That's what our problem is. And whenever they're not transparent, it makes you feel like they're covering something up, which I genuinely think they are. And it's one of the very unique paranoid elements in American politics that really feels like it crosses pretty much all political boundaries. True, but I will say, like I showed on the YouTube selection, yeah, you can tell from those titles which of those channels are gunning for the left and which are gunning for the right, because the ones on the left are desperate for Donald Trump to be involved. That's why I'm saying it, like, even just I think the latest person to have to testify in front of, I think it was done privately, but I know someone has got hold of her, is it a deposition, was his former assistant, Sarah Kellen. So she's now saying that she's a victim. I mean, she may have said that before. I'm not entirely sure, but I remember she did come up in Virginia's book, and I remember that there was a scene that she described when they were on the balcony with Jelaine, and I think Virginia was just trying to like fit in with them, so she didn't really say anything like too bad about her. But yeah, she's definitely said she was a victim, and she just felt like she was trying to be a model, and she was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein, and she actually went for a casting with him, and she said that did not go well because he wanted her to come back to his hotel room and she never did. But then it's actually really interesting because she was working at what's it called, Frederick Fekkai, yeah, the hairdressers, and Les Wexner, the L brand group, bought Frederick Fekkai. So she's working in her local branch, and suddenly this intern turns up and starts telling her, oh, there's this rich couple I know that are looking for an assistant, and it's Jeffrey and Jelaine. And so it's just really weird because it's almost like Jeffrey kind of tracked her down. And so she gets the job anyway. But yeah, so I can't remember why I was saying that. It's gone. I lost my train of thought because I got so lost in my story. Anyway, no, that was it. They kept asking her about Donald Trump, like, how many times did you meet him? Did he come to the house? Was he there? Was he? And she was literally saying no. So it just doesn't seem like he was very present in Jeffrey Epstein's life as much as people have been making out. Because this is like the 2000s. Obviously, before that, maybe. She did say they went to the Mar-a-Lago club once. Well, obviously, she went with him once and got introduced to him. Okay, I've certainly met conservatives and liberals and Trump supporters and Trump haters who all think that Jeffrey Epstein did not take his own life. So he uses the word bipartisan. It's a bipartisan view that hasn't really dimmed. These are the jargon phrases that I don't use. So he says, right, this has been amplified online by literally everyone from Donald Trump to Hunter Biden at one point or another. So he introduces the word conspiracy. As somebody who has written a lot about conspiratorial thinking in American life, I'm curious what you yourself think of that viewpoint. So he says, I think I shared a pretty common skepticism about the official story of his death going into this reporting. There was just a lot about it that seemed very strange. And there was a huge amount of mistakes and technical failures and just kind of weird mysteries around his death that was hard to take at face value for a lot of people. Very true. I can't argue with that. So then he says the suspicion around the case was really inflamed by the release of the Epstein files. Absolutely. I mean, this is the thing as well. It's like a lot of this, the reason why some of these narratives get so big is just because of what takes off, what goes viral. You know, it's I just wish that more important things sometimes could go viral, but I'm trying to do something. Let's just see what I'm missing. Candace Owens, I see Candace Owens. Candace Owens, he didn't went out the back door. I know there was something about him being switched to a different van or something. I can't remember the exact story. I mean, look, there's a lot of grey areas with the whole thing, but then at the end of the day, I mean, you can't expect it. This is someone who's died. I think even taking sort of illicit pictures of corpses is really morbid and sus anyway. I just think it's, you know, I know Jeffrey Epstein is a horrible, disgusting person, but he's still a human being at the end of the day. Candace, okay, went apparently going to the deep dive on this. Oh, right. Well, don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. Like, she's another one that says she does investigations. I mean, this is what I'm trying to say. It's like, I genuinely feel like this New York Times thing is an investigation. Like, and I know they're not, you know, there's probably a lot we don't know, but it still seems pretty good. Oh, don't get me started on Sonia Poulton. Michael Jackson has passed. I know, but there's genuinely people out there that think he's still alive. Actually, that was what I was going to do. You just reminded me. I was going to read through the comments on this video. I just want you to see this. Let me go back to it, right?
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done in a list view. Next,
and do not know the times.
Okay. So this has 6,000 views now. But these are the comments. How about he walked out the door dressed as someone else? He did not kill himself. When you look at the videos of the body taken out, there's videos. Oh yeah, I guess they're from a long way away, but that's what I mean. Like, they're obscured. They're not like they're not an official. Like, you wouldn't expect to get an official video of that of anyone. So I think it's pretty hard to make a proper analysis from that alone. When you look at all the videos of the body taken out, does not match autopsy report. Body does not match. So he's going to address the autopsy report. But another thing that made me suspicious was the guy who Jeffrey Epstein's brother trotted out, I should say, is like some TV autopsy guy. And on Status Quo News, they're like, he's done all these TV shows. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't mean he's trustworthy at all. That means the opposite. That means he's paid. He, you know, he's cashing in. Does not mean he's credible. My personal opinion is he isn't dead, but is still alive, more than likely over there in Israel. Is there even a photo of the body hanging? unbelievable that they didn't take a pic. Again, he's going to address that. Yeah, another thing Sarah Kellen was asked about was whether she ever heard about Mossad, and she said nope. F corporate media, F the Epstein class. Thank you for all your work, Status Quo crew. As always, sending love and light from Mississippi. Y'all stay safe. So what I will say about Status Quo, yeah, because I have been watching them a long time, and I just think it's a shame because I genuinely think the guy used to do like a really hard job. He used to go, like, you know, when there was that train crash in Pennsylvania, like he went onto the scene there. He was doing proper like on the scene reporting, but like the last sort of year, let's say, he's really changed. He's become like really corporate. He's constantly ramming the memberships down the audience, like putting that into the script. And they don't do sponsorships, but even the amount of ads that play on their videos is crazy. So yeah, but then he's always like, we're independent. He's still alive somewhere. I am beyond disgusted with corporate media. SCN loyal viewer here. Absence of evidence isn't evidence itself. That is true. Yeah, Julie has said everything points to homicide. I don't know. I guess she's talking about Julie K. Brown, but I know Julie K. Brown has done a lot of integral reporting herself, so I don't know if she said that. They wanted him dead. He knew that. Of course, he would have bouts of depression. Does not mean he was wanting to take his own life. Evidence was mishandled, tapes gone or not functioning, God getting mysterious payments. Yeah, no chance. I do think there was a cover-up, but I think it's because they didn't want people to know how incompetent the jail was being run. That's just my personal view after hearing like what they presented after the investigation. Jeffrey Epstein confirmed in the Epstein files that he'd had his prostate removed. How did the supposed Epstein body regrow a prostate? I don't know. The medical examiner reported that his prostate was slightly enlarged. Now, I do remember actually someone debunked this. I think if you actually read what it said in the Epstein files, he didn't say he'd had his prostate removed, if I remember correctly. So they're kind of mistelling that story a little bit. I think he'd had some tests done on it or something. Until someone clears up that mega contradiction of facts. Well, they already have. You just got to go and find the right channels. Then I believe he didn't commit and the body was switched. Someone on Reddit. I'm sorry, I can't with Reddit. I think you already know what I think about it. Someone on Reddit has claimed to work at the prison, said Epstein was taken shackled in a medical wheelchair accompanied by a nurse and loaded into an unauthorized van. Ooh. Wonder how long their account had been around for. I do not believe anything what they say. There is documented proof that he had a plan to get out of there. Sean Ryan, I don't know who Sean Ryan is, but I can only imagine, had an investigator on his show with documented proof. J.E. Brother said he didn't off himself. Well, exactly. This is where this all started from. It started from his brother. And I'm sorry, his brother's a crook. And his brother literally, if he wasn't a pedo himself, he definitely 100% knew and supported and enabled it. You definitely can't tell me otherwise. Let me just get a drink of water. Any more comments? I mean, it's just not one person that's not sort of supporting this video. What does this one say? That this is a recent comment. There's no motive to conceal suicide. There is profound motive to conceal homicide. This is Occam's razor, whatever that means. Where's the body? What cemetery? It was cremated. Even I know that. Yeah, no, there would have been an autopsy. Where is that? Well, there's been. We're going to get onto it. All these questions are answered. As usual, precise and sharp reporting here. Thanks for your good work. What slagging off the New York Times' investigation is precise and sharp. Okay. Melania might know. What's with all those blankets? What a mess his cell was. That's another thing they're going to talk about. Okay, so basically, I don't think there's one sensible comment there, honestly. All right, let me go back to my transcript. Just leave that there. Right. Okay. There are thousands of pages in the files relating to this series of federal investigations into his death. There was one that immediately followed by the FBI and federal prosecutors, and then there was one by the Office of the Inspector General of the Justice Department that went on for years after this. And a lot of the raw materials of those investigations are in the Epstein files. So my colleagues and I, Steve Eder, Jan Ransom, Michael Rothfield, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 journalists were working on this story. We dove into these papers a couple of months ago and just started digging and seeing what was there. So many of these files, there's just so many of them. There is. I mean, I thought it was 1 million, but apparently it was 3 million, and that's only a small percentage. That even some of the stuff that's been out that the public have seen has not actually really been fully picked through. I completely agree. I wish there was more people doing it. Like, I was loving all the Epstein file research live streams, and then people just stopped doing them. And we were able to take advantage of the experience of some of the people on this project who really know the story from the front to the back, and who were able to make connections inside of these files and figure out who some of the people were who we were reading about in some of these redacted documents. Great. Okay. This is what you call journalism. So we used these documents as a roadmap to do our own investigation, interviewing anybody we could find, gathering any other documents we could find, and trying to construct his last days, wow, in as much detail as possible. So they've documented the moments leading up to it. So this is what we haven't heard before. And the biggest question of all, how did he die? Did he die by taking his own life, or did something else happen? And we found that all the evidence that we gathered really did point towards one conclusion. So this completely contradicts the title of Status Quo's video and the other one they put out, saying they denied it was that. I mean, I would not call this scrambling, is what I'm trying to say, at all. Okay. So he says, we're going to get to the conclusion. But first, can you reconstruct the story you found in all your reporting? And can you pick up with what happens after the person working at the jail spotted that he was looking very despondent and distraught as he's coming in? So within hours of him arriving, he has his first real encounter in the jail. This is really interesting, this bit. The inmates, because this place is rough. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it sounds like a hellhole. And imagine him going in, Mr. Like, he's just come off his private jet. He's used to people literally at his beck and call doing anything he says, anything he asks for, he gets. People, literally everyone around him is indebted to him. They're scared of him. That's what Sarah Kellen was saying. She was like, as soon as I met him, he found out that I had debts, and he was like, I'll pay off your credit card bill. And then she's like, after that, you feel like you're indebted to him, but then he keeps making you like more and more promises which he doesn't fulfill. So you're always like hanging in there thinking, well, one day he might do it, because he was always making people feel like they weren't good enough. That was his like character. And I picked up on that in some of the messages, the way he spoke to his girlfriends. I just thought it was just disgusting and gross. Like, he made them feel so bad about themselves, like constantly nagging them, saying, well, you didn't go to the gym enough. I told you not to eat that. You know, like a bully, like a passive aggressive bully he is. So the inmates have quickly figured out who he is, and a guy called Locotron, which is Dominican slang for like a crazy person, came up to him with his t-shirt pulled up over his face like a proper G, like covering his face, obviously, no face, no case, and shakes him down for money. It's this very quick interaction, but something that he's really rattled by. So, as I just said, if you think about it, hours before, he's on his own private jet, he's crossing the Atlantic, and suddenly he's thrown into this notorious jail. He's mugged by one of the inmates in a sort of protection scheme. And he's already, like, obviously feeling very vulnerable. It's an incredible, he says, it's an incredible reversal of fortune. It's almost hard to imagine. I mean, yeah. After everything that's been said, I was just thinking, like, I wonder if this is what happened with Diddy as well. So by the next day, the jail warden figured out who he is, and they decide that they've got to put him somewhere else because he's not going to be safe in the general population, they call it. There's too much risk. And so they put him in what's called the Special Housing Unit, or the SHU, which is a sort of solitary confinement wing. And it's a very isolated place, as we saw from the camera footage, the installed inside cameras. And they're stuck inside their cells for 23 hours a day, which is, again, extremely hard going. If you think about how often he was communicating with people, like, he was very used to being in constant communication with people, constantly having, his whole day was mapped out with meetings, and you're going here and this person's coming here, and not to mention his supposed addiction for having to relieve himself 7 times a day or whatever it was. So the isolated unit is used to house people for a few things, including very, very serious crimes and violent crimes. So it's like literally the worst place. So they put him there for his own safety, which is crazy. So he's led to his new cell, And that's when he meets his cellmate, who's the guy called Nicholas Taglioni. That was the guy who was on News Nation, the mass murderer. And the door closes behind him. And Epstein says to the guy, Tartelloni, he asks him what he's there for, and he says multiple murders, multiple homicides. So apparently he starts banging on the door and saying, "Let me out of here." He's proper freaking out. He's basically saying, "Get me the hell out of this cell. I don't want to be the next victim of this alleged multi-homicidal maniac." So then Charles says, exactly, but there was a logic from the prison wardens for putting him in the cell with this guy. So how they reasoned it was that people who have been accused of very serious violent crimes, not in prison, while they're awaiting trial, are actually very unlikely to commit further violent crimes, which kind of, I mean, look, there's a lot of arguments about whether people have mental illnesses and psychopathy. And, I think there's a very strong argument that these people are able to control their instincts and their impulses when they want to. So, yeah, they're sort of saying that, like, they thought that he would be okay with someone in that position because they're not going to risk with their trial about to happen, they're not going to risk committing another crime against someone. And he was facing the death penalty at that point. So he had every incentive not to kill someone like Jeffrey Epstein. That was their reasoning. I'm not saying I agree with it or not. His incentives are to be, in this logic, as good to Epstein as possible, so that at sentencing, the theory is that if he behaves well while he's awaiting for his trial, that could be taken into account when he's sentenced, and therefore he might avoid the death penalty. But for the wardens in the situation, the goal wasn't just to find someone to share a cell with him who's not going to kill him. The goal was to find someone who was going to stop him from hurting himself. That's what they said. From the time they realize who they've got to deal with here, that's the question they're asking. Because of the nature of the charges that he's facing, there's sort of an automatic assessment for risk that happens very early in his jail time. And so he's assessed by the prison psychologist very early on. And from those early conversations, this guy said, actually, the risk isn't that great. So that's something that the brother has been pushing out hard, and also Status Quo News. So, like, obviously, when I was watching this story unfold, I was like, okay, well, I've got to take that into consideration now. I was really buying it. I was like, yeah, he definitely didn't sound like he wanted to take his own life. Not at all. Not at all. He seems pretty upbeat. He seems optimistic that he's going to get bail. He feels like he's confident about being able to fight the charges against him. Okay, so then what happens? So in mid-July, he finds out that he has had his bail denied and that he's going to have to stay where he is until he goes to trial. So that's a big L, a big shock. Oh my God. It's already made my video. It's already like age restricted my video. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Okay. That's really crazy. That has not happened to me before. See, this is why you have to use these substitute words, and it hasn't even worked. I hope you guys are still watching anyway. I don't know. I'm just going to carry on. I might have to edit it and then I'll try and upload. I'll try and re-upload it. Okay, so they spoke to Tartaglione, his cellmate, yeah, and he said that when he came back from the hearing, so obviously this wasn't on camera, he did that. He spoke to them independently. I mean, privately. And I don't know whether they had to give him anything for the interview, or whether he offered it voluntarily, but I imagine if they want to retain integrity, it has to be done from his own volition. So he comes back from the hearing where his bail was denied, and he turned around and asked, how do you make a NOOSE? So that seems pretty clearly that he was serious about taking action, because I don't know why else you would do that. So the guy on the podcast says, wow, he's despondent. And so when Tartaglione, when he says that to him, what does he do about it? What does he do about him asking him that question? How do you make a thing out of string that you put around your neck to take your own life? I don't want to say the word. So after this, Tartaglione told us he noticed Epstein doing what seemed to be making preparations for taking his own life twice in the days after his bail was denied. Such as what? In one instance, he was tying a sheet to a grate over the window. This is the same guy that said there's no way you could have done it in that cell. In one instance, he was tying a sheet to a grate over the window in the corner of their cell. Another time, he said he woke up and saw him kind of standing strangely in their cell, and looked under his mattress and found that he'd hidden a thing that you put around your neck to hang yourself with, hiding. So they're saying, yeah, that definitely sounds like he had some intentions and he wasn't feeling good. But I'm curious, asks the podcaster, as to what is he telling people on the outside to the degree he has access to them about his state of mind. So I heard that he was spending a lot of time with his lawyers because that was like wasting up his time. So he didn't have to be in his cell. I mean, that's what I heard. So Charles replies, it's interesting. One group we found in our reporting that had a pretty clear window on him while he was in jail with his lawyers. Yes, this is where I heard it. His lawyers were visiting him for hours every day at the jail. He's now been, I don't feel that bad for them, but I mean, that can't have been very comfortable or pleasant at all. He's been in this very isolated unit in the jail for a number of days, and he says things to his lawyers like, I can't do this. And he's often writing notes to himself on a legal pad. And in these conversations, in these notes, he's writing about his state of mind, which really does seem to be getting worse. So he did write notes to himself. He did it on his email. So in the notes, he's talking about things like just the noise in the unit where he's being held. He writes, no sleep, no air, screams. He's conveying that this is a really miserable experience. I mean, definitely. It sounds like hellish. On July 23rd, so when was the bail denied? It was mid-July, they said, so it's about a week or so, or several days after his bail is denied. At around 1:30 in the morning, the guards hear banging coming from his cell. And when they arrive, they see Tartellone is yelling at the door. And so Epstein's lying on the floor, motionless, with the orange around his neck. This is what we've come to understand to be his first attempt at potentially taking his own life. Yes. And at the time, it is not clear, because going through the documentation of this incident, we saw a lot of genuine uncertainty on the part of the jail staff about what actually happened here. So the jail staff were not sure about what actually happened because nobody saw it. And obviously Tartellone is not exactly Mr. Trustworthy. And they both tell different stories as well about what happened from the start. Tartellone says that Epstein did try to take his own life. I can't believe that he's been out here on YouTube channels saying that isn't true now, saying something else. Tartellone was sleeping on the floor of their cell when he said he felt something bump into his feet. And so he looked up and he saw Epstein unconscious in this sitting position with the thing around his neck, hanging from their bunk. And he cuts him down and yells for the guards. So I'm just saying, this story about he couldn't have done it in that cell, obviously not true. Epstein's version of this story kind of changes over time. First of all, he says that Tartellone attacked him. And then later, he starts saying that he doesn't remember what happened, that he got up to get a drink of water, and the next thing he knew, he was lying on the floor. And later on, he tells the story to one of the lawyers who visits him that Tartellone was playing some sort of prank on him. And it's all a little unclear in the telling. So I guess the staff weren't really able to know exactly what happened. They're like, well, who do we believe here? I'm just reading between the lines. So during this time, the jail psychologists, wardens are trying to make sense of the case. And they end up kind of uncertain about what's actually happened and how much risk that Jeffrey Epstein really seems to pose to himself. But what they found out from their reporting was a piece of evidence that these people didn't have, and it might have changed their view. if they had it at the time, but they didn't have it. And so what was that evidence and why was it hidden? So he says that after it happened, Tartaglione is looking through a graphic novel that he has in their cell when he finds a piece of paper, and it looks very much like a note. So I guess this is the note that he said that got revealed to us. So the note says, they investigated me for a month, found nothing. And then he writes, it's a treat to be able to choose one's time to say goodbye. And then, what you want me to do? Burst out crying? No fun, not worth it. So what's really interesting about the last bit of that note, when he says, what do you want me to do? Burst out crying. They said that it's a line from an early TV movie called The Little Rascals. And it's something that Epstein had latched onto as kind of a personal catchphrase, and that he used it a lot in his emails. I haven't looked it up myself, but I'm trusting them. Obviously, I will have to verify that at some point. He threw it into emails with very close friends and family sometimes. And so what they're saying is, okay, sometimes, not all the time. They're saying that it would have been impossible for Tartaglione to have known that he uses this phrase. And that's very personal to Epstein. So that kind of verifies that the note was written by him. They said it's a very specific phrase that he seemed only to use with people he was very close to. So they're saying that, well, they're classifying this as a note, an S note. And he says, so why was that kept hidden from jail officials? So Charles says, well, for complicated reasons, the note ends up being sealed in Tartaglione's case. And the reason that they know about it is because they sued. Wow. They sued to get this judge in the case to unseal the document. That's wild. The judge eventually unsealed it. So at the time, the jail, this is actual investigative journalism. I'm sorry. I don't care what anyone says at this point. Come on. They really put the work in to do that. They sued the judge just to get this note unsealed. So at the time, the jail authorities didn't know. I'm guessing maybe that guy was using it for something. I don't know. Maybe he was holding it as an asset. At the time, the jail authorities did not know about the note, and they were still trying to figure out what to make about the attempt or who to believe. And in the end, the jail psychologist decided that his risk of taking his own life was only moderate. So the jail are really at fault here. They really are, which is a very good incentive for covering it up. And so he's sent back to the special housing unit, the SHU, where he was being held when it happened. And this time he's got a new cellmate who's a guy called Ephraim Rees, who's 50 years old. He is a 50-year-old drug dealer from the Bronx who is in the SHU because he's cooperating in another case. So he's like in witness protection, I guess. So he's also there for his own safety. So what does Rees observe about Epstein? So Rees becomes one of the most interesting witnesses to his time in jail. And he was interviewed by investigators. But he unfortunately passed away of heart disease in 2020. Oh, we were not able to interview him. But there are handwritten notes in the Epstein files of an interview with Rees by a federal prosecutor, and they are one of the most interesting documents of Epstein's time in jail. Rees seems to get to know him pretty well. They spend a lot of time together in the cell, and he struck the people who interviewed him as a fairly genuine person who seemed to want to help Epstein deal with his time there. They traded food. Epstein appreciates clearly some of his help and gets him a radio from the commissary. Rees notices that the guards are deferential to Epstein. They let him hang onto those extra sheets. So I'm guessing deferential means they gave him a pass. They let him hang on to those extra sheets that he's stashed in the cell, which was not uncommon because the air conditioning, it was very cold in the summer in this jail. There's your answer to why there were so many blankets in there. They're kind of building a relationship in the cell that feels really genuine. And by the time Jeffrey Epstein comes back and is placed with Rees in his cell, his reputation has sort of preceded him. Not only do they know who he is, but also they know that there's been this incident that could have been an unaliving attempt. And Rees, from the beginning, is very worried that Epstein is going to attempt to do it again while he's living with him. And he actually brings this up directly with Jeffrey Epstein a few times. He keeps saying to him, please don't do nothing while I'm in here, please. I've got a chance to go home and I don't care what you did. That's all I'm asking is please do not do it while I'm here. If I can help you, let me know. So he's saying, don't take your own life on my watch. That's bad for me. Exactly. So Rees notices that something which happened quite a lot with inmates at the center is that they would fashion clotheslines out of bits of bed sheets. And Rees has these lines that he's made himself by tying strips of the sheets together. And he notices that Jeffrey Epstein is looking at and fidgeting with this line that he's got strung up in the cell. And he kind of puts two and two together and confronts him. And he says, bro, we're not doing this. And he takes it away from him and he flushes it down the toilet in their cell. And Epstein says something very interesting to him. He says, don't worry, I'm never going to cause you any trouble. So yeah, this has obviously been going on now for quite a while. Seems like he's pretty set on taking this course of action from what we're hearing from this witness. He said this last witness was credible from what he heard. So he says, don't worry, I'm not going to try and do that. And Rees, another time, he tries to convince Jeffrey Epstein that you can survive in prison. He says you can live in jail. But Epstein's not having it. He's very pessimistic, and he says that the government is still mad at him about his plea agreement that he made the last time he was prosecuted, and that they're not going to let him out again. He says, I know I'm never going to be out again. And he says that living in prison is no way to live. So I'm surprised to hear that, actually. I didn't know that he would be thinking like that. I thought he was so arrogant and full of himself that he was thinking, yeah, I can get through this. Like I said, I genuinely think he was plotting in a lot of the emails that I read. He was plotting with Steve Bannon to kind of like launch some kind of PR campaign to try and fit into the manosphere. And I think with that journalist guy as well, I definitely think that they had some kind of plan to try and bring down Trump. And the amount of time he was spending with his lawyers, I guess they were just saying, that ain't happening. So it's now early August, and he's been in jail for a month only. He's only been there for a month. And on the 9th of August, Ray's is moved to another facility. And he's so worried about Jeffrey Epstein at this time that he tells the officials on his way out, get him a good cellmate. He's not good to be alone. Wow. Well, that's pretty serious. Don't leave Jeffrey Epstein alone if I'm not here with him. So he's basically saying he's ringing the alarm there. He's saying, look, this guy is really unstable. But that's exactly what happens, is he's going to be left all on his own in the cell for the last night of his life. So on his last day, you said he's suddenly left alone, despite his cellmate who's just left him saying to the officials this would be a really bad idea. Charles says that in their reporting, they found it genuinely unclear why he was not given a new cellmate. A number of people raised the issue, but for whatever reason, by the end of the day, he still didn't have anyone in the cell with him. So he returned to his cell. So we saw that on the video. He returned to his cell and he's all on his own. The only people watching him at this point are the guards. So now we're getting on to the guards. So there's two. Okay, so he says, how many guards are watching him? So the jail has, for a very long time, had a load of chronic problems, and one of them is the issue of staffing. Surprise, surprise, because it's a corporation. It's understaffed, it's overcrowded with inmates, and the staff who were there working, because it's understaffed, tend to be working extremely long hours, which has this domino effect. They're often very, very tired. Sometimes they call in sick because they need to catch up on sleep. And people are being subbed in at all sorts of jobs they don't normally do to fill the rotas. This is not just happening in prisons. This is happening in every industry. It's just kind of a recipe for disaster. So much so that 6 months before this even happened, a union official representing the corrections officers at this jail had sent a letter of warning to the Bureau of Prisons, which said, quote, quite frankly, at this point, we are one incident away from a staff or inmate DEATH So there are two guards are on duty in the special housing unit the night that it happened, and they sit at the desk, and you can actually see from his cell. So I think we could see that on the camera if I remember correctly. And when Rees was still in the cell, they could watch the guards at night and when Rees was still in the cell, they would watch the guards at night and note their behaviors and the fact that they were often sleeping on the job. So Epstein was aware that the guards were probably going to fall asleep, and he was aware of how they behaved and that they weren't going to have their attention on him at certain times. So Charles is asked, given all the problems at the jail, what did you and your colleagues learn about what the guards on duty that night did or didn't do? So he says, there was one guard who was on duty the entire period of time leading up to his death. Let me quickly grab the charger. She'd basically been working the whole day when she was forced to take another overtime shift beginning at midnight. So she's doing a double shift because they haven't got anyone else to come in. And the result of this is that she's sort of the one guard who's there throughout this whole period of time when he ends his life. So, yeah, I mean, this happens in the care industry as well. This happens with a lot of vulnerable people. Not enough people to do the job, where these are people that the companies are being paid to do specialist care. And at the beginning of that time period, she's working with another guard who's sort of unaccounted for. He might be sleeping. It's a bit uncertain. And she's doing what the guards are meant to be doing, which is regular rounds, going around the cells in the special housing unit, just checking to see that everything is okay. And then she comes to Jeffrey Epstein's cell. He asks her to plug in his CPAP machine that he needs to sleep because he has sleep apnea, which is weird. She plugs the machine in and continues on her way. This is the last time that anyone sees him alive, and it's a little bit after 10 o'clock. So the night goes on. Noel and the other guards, what's her name? Tova, Noel, and the other guards are supposed to go around and check on these inmates regularly. There's actually a sign on the desk that says they should be doing a check every half an hour on him. He's on watch. This is the one thing they're absolutely meant to be doing. Somebody has said to them, whatever else you do, check on him. Right. And that is the one thing they do not do for the rest of the night. We know this from the video camera footage of this part of the jail. They're sat at the desk. It seems possible that they could be asleep, although they've both denied it. But nobody is going around to check on the cells for the whole night. So because of that, they came to learn in their reporting that the only people who were really alert to what was happening in his cell were the other people in the cells in the unit with him. And what did they see? So we found an inmate who at the time was housed in the cell next to him, and he told a very interesting story. He said that one thing about the cells is you can hear a lot between them. Well, that doesn't surprise me. And late at night, he hears he hears ripping sounds coming from Epstein's cell. Ripping sounds? He says it sounds like someone's ripping sheets in there. And he kind of connects the dots and clearly has some sense of what's going on. And so he tries to distract Epstein, and he calls out to him and he says, have you got any? He says, yo, have you got any stamps? Stamps are kind of a common currency that they use in jail. And Epstein says, no, I didn't order any stamps, and basically tells him to go away. And that's the end of the interaction. The inmate says that he keeps hearing the sounds for a while and then it goes quiet. So then what happens? So from this point onwards, things are very quiet in the special housing unit for the next 6 hours. And then, so now we're at 6:30 in the morning, and there's another guard on duty, a man by the name of Michael Thomas. He's taking the breakfast round, and he rolls a cart into the corridor where Epstein's cell is. And he sees him. Part of his body is lying motionless. So he's seeing him through the window in the cell, and he calls out for him. And he doesn't move. So he opens the door and he sees him hanging. So Michael Thomas, the guard, calls out for the other guard, Tova Noel, and Noel activates the alarm. This is very important, this bit, because it's obviously very chaotic. Meanwhile, Thomas pulls Epstein down from where he's hanging, and he puts him out on the floor, lays him out on the floor, and starts doing CPR, chest compressions. And he's shouting, breathe, Epstein, breathe. That's crazy. This guy is doing CPR on Jeffrey Epstein. And then she hears him say, we're going to be in so much trouble. What does that sound like? He was on, I mean, it's kind of unforgivable, really. She hears him say, we're going to be in so much trouble. And about an hour later, he's been taken to the hospital and declared deceased. So, yeah. So now he's asked that at the beginning of the conversation, you said that with all the investigating and reporting that you did, you came to one conclusion. And that conclusion, it would seem, would be only one thing, and that's he's taken his own life. So Charlie says, yes. In all of our reporting, it was clear that all the evidence overwhelmingly pointed to that outcome, to that, what do they call it? Conclusion. So just to summarize once more, he had been talking about it. He had been actively attempting it. He had been writing references to doing it in the days and weeks before it happened. It's reflected in the notes that he wrote in there. People that spent the most time with him, his cellmates, could sense it. And they were literally warning the officials. And this was sort of the starting point for the first people who investigated it after it happened. So, yeah, and I mean, I'm thinking like these are not exactly like super sensitive people we're talking about here. These are like proper, like hardcore, in the case of his first cellmate, violent criminals. I don't know about the drugs dealer, but I'm sure he wasn't exactly like well, I can't even say like a school teacher anymore. You know what I mean? A placid person. I mean, sorry. Okay, forget I said it. I think that pretty much immediately after they found him, there were questions about how did it happen, and a lot of them seemed to operate on the assumption that it was unthinkable that someone as significant as him would have been allowed to do this to themselves. But the people who actually knew the facility well, the inmates, and certainly the federal prosecutors who spend a lot of time dealing with people that are held there, they had a much better sense of what kind of facility this was, and that it was a place where lapses from the guards were very common and things went wrong a lot. A lot of things went wrong. And it wasn't necessarily as counterintuitive to them that someone would have been able to get away with it. So now they're going to talk about the gaps in the storyline, okay? So first of all, it's the autopsy. The day after his body was found, the city's medical examiner did a full autopsy, and she concluded, because it's another thing that I've seen discussed a lot in videos, that he had died by doing that to himself. But there are a set of credible questions about the marks on his body and whether they were exclusively consistent with that or whether they would have been consistent with a homicide. Yeah, so the marks on his neck, they were talking about whether they could have been self-inflicted by the things that were found or that we saw were found in the cell. There was a mix-up with the thing that was used, so they're going to talk about that. Again, in the conversations and the videos that have been reporting on this up till now, this is not included in how they've been presenting it. We put this to a number of pathologists and actually got many different opinions when they were looking at the photos, but nearly all of them say that it's really not possible to determine the manner of death conclusively from looking at the body alone, and that you would need all the other information about the circumstances in which it was found, the scene of where it happened, and that's the information that no one has, because a lot of it wasn't gathered at the time of his death. And why wasn't it gathered? Well, because this is the second gap, which is these really, really pretty big holes in the initial handling of the scene and some aspects of the first investigations. So remember, he's found in the morning at about 6:30 by one of the prison guards or the jail guards who's bringing in breakfast. He's bringing in breakfast, and that guard didn't actually say to the investigators or really anybody, except for maybe his supervisors, what he saw until much, much later, actually 2 years later. What? Is when he gives a real interview to investigators. So he wasn't interviewed for 2 years after the incident. That's crazy. And in that interview, he didn't really have a lot of detail. He had some detail about how the body was found when he got there, but not very much. And by the time anybody else makes it into the cell, he has pulled Jeffrey Epstein down and he's laid him out on the floor. And pretty soon, there's lots of people entering the cell. There's other guards. There's EMTs, I guess, emergency medical people. All sorts of people are coming in and out and trampling over the death scene. So they've contaminated the evidence and the scene by the time the FBI shows up. And for that reason, according to their own records, the FBI agents did not take DNA evidence from anything in the scene. Charles said this is a bit unusual. A normal procedure would have been to take DNA evidence, but they didn't do that because the scene had been contaminated. So from everything you're saying, what you'd expect to be a fairly pristine investigatory scene, because it's occurring in a federally controlled facility, like literally one of the most guarded facilities in the country, meant to be, if not in the state or the city, staffed by law enforcement, turns into a bit of a fiasco. He says it's not that unusual and that a lot of people are thinking that he might not actually be, that he might be still alive then. So their first priority was to resuscitate him, if that's possible. So it's not crazy that the guards and paramedics are sort of trampling all over the place, but that is what happened. And it led to them making some real errors in terms of cataloguing the evidence of the scene. The most notable example being that they grabbed the wrong noose from the cell. So there was a number of different homemade things to hang himself, or things that look like them, that Epstein had around him in the cell. So that's why people are saying, why were there all those blankets in there? The cell was really a mess. There were all these piles of linens, and there were a number of these strips of fabric kind of scattered around the cell. So the people that had shared the cell with him were the ones that were saying that the guards were giving him extra sheets, you know. Before they would have known about, I mean, there's no way for them to know about this scene because they weren't in that facility anymore. The one that they grabbed was tied in the shape of a noose, but investigators later concluded was not the one he'd actually used. So I have seen that being discussed, where they're like, well, this couldn't have done, the injuries consistent with what he had on his neck. The fact that they grabbed it and that wasn't the one that was sort of seen in the evidence created a lot of suspicions around this, because if you look at the pictures of his body, they really clearly didn't match the noose that we'd seen in a picture at the time. This is just one mistake on top of another. Yes, it is. And on top of all of that, there's a huge problem, another huge problem, which is the security camera footage, the system of the jail. There were cameras all over the unit where Epstein was being held, but a number of days before this happened, there was a hardware failure. And so half of the cameras weren't even working. They weren't even recording anything. In real time, they were not recording any video. So he's saying they could see them on monitors, but they weren't recording. And this meant that there were only 2 cameras recording in the area outside of his corridor that captured any of the events that night. So again, because there were failings within the institution that like millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars are spent on, they just didn't want to admit that, is the way I'm seeing it. In other words, there are things we will never know because we will never look at the cameras. And I was thinking as well, yeah, like I really think that CoffeeZilla needs to come out and do a follow-up video now. Let's see if he does. So that has raised the question of whether somebody could have gotten into the blank spot on the tape and made their way into his cell and committed the act of causing his death. And one piece of evidence that people marshal to show that would have been possible is this little enigmatic fragment of video from one of the two cameras that was actually recording that night. One of the two cameras, the one that we've spent the most time looking at, was trained on the common area of the SHU, including the desk where the guards were sitting, and it catches a little sliver of the staircase leading up to his cell. I'll have to see if I can find the video now, the footage. Around 10:40 that night, after Tova Noel does her one round, we see this orange shape in the corner of the frame that appears to be moving up the staircase to the door to the hallway outside Epstein's cell. And it's there for a few seconds, and then it goes. And this has fueled a lot of speculation that maybe that was somebody sneaking into the hallway to get into his cell. So we spent a lot of time with our colleagues from visual investigations looking at all the evidence here. Would it be possible for somebody to sneak into the cell without being noticed or captured by cameras that night? And what we found is that there was a pathway by which somebody could have gotten up to the cell that would not have been caught on camera or would have accounted for this tiny sliver of movement. Anybody getting into the SHU that night, though, would have had to get through several locked doors. One of them was controlled remotely by a control center of the jail, people who would be watching this door on camera. The other, there were 3 doors that the person would have had to get through, all of which were opened only with a physical key. So that's a pretty hard task, somehow getting there in the first place, then getting through 3 sets of doors that are all constantly being monitored on camera. I mean, if there hadn't been so much evidence to show that he probably did it to himself, then yeah, this could have been much more like a bigger thing. He says, we're talking about Mission Impossible levels of difficulty here. This would have had to involve a plot involving 2 whole separate areas of the jail, a very detailed knowledge of the security cameras and which cameras were working, which cameras were not working, who was monitoring which cameras, who had the keys, how to get those keys while not being on camera. We're talking about an extremely elaborate choreography, and we found nothing in our reporting to suggest that any of this nature actually happened. So in the end, the simplest explanation of what happened here, which everyone struggled to accept for a very long time, that this so-called powerful man, this rich and powerful billionaire who did basically what he wanted, who did terrible things to people and got away with it for so long, enters prison and is put into pretty much solitary confinement, is completely horrified by it, decides he can't handle it, and he takes his own life. That seems to be not just the simplest explanation, but the very likeliest. Right. Charles says, we came away thinking, was it theoretically possible? When people talk about critical thinking, this is it. Was it theoretically possible there was an alternate explanation? Maybe. but there's simply no evidence that anything else happened, whereas you have to weigh that against this mountain of evidence showing that he was clearly intent on taking his own life at the time. So you've accepted the explanation that he took his own life. I think I have at this point. It's the rational way to look at what we know about this case and what we are likely to know about this case. I think there are a lot of unknowns that are going to remain unknown, but the bottom line is that whatever reason there is to think anything else could have happened, there is simply not the evidence that we need to stand up a convincing alternative explanation of how he died. So then they go on and they talk about how people are suspicious of the government, and that the theory all along was that somebody killed him in jail and that the government wanted to hide it and cover it up, and that the reporting doesn't support that conclusion. Well, I definitely think it supports that there was a cover-up and a lot of ineptitude in the fact that they never did an investigation properly until 2 years after it happened, if they never interviewed the person that found him for all of that time. But what your reporting does support is the conclusion that the government's incompetence in running this jail at lots of levels, from staffing to failing to pick up all kinds of clues that he left and right, that he was intending to take his own life, to the number of contraband sheets in his cell the night that it happened that allowed him to do it to himself. And that's the reason why people should be mad at the government, because its conduct in this jail, which it runs, let Jeffrey Epstein take his own life and evade justice. And the government had a pretty simple job here, which was to keep him alive so that he could go on to trial and so that there could be justice. And it completely failed to do that. And it completely failed to do it with the other one, his co-conspirator, Jean-Luc Brunel. And then what about that one that... Didn't he shoot himself or something? It came up in the Bill Clinton deposition. He said, and then obviously poor Virginia as well, never got justice really. I mean, she did, but she never got peace, I should say. She got some justice. She was getting there. She was still attacked on a daily basis, even when she was at her lowest point. Charles said, I think that's right. The government can do things to breed suspicion. It doesn't just have to act nefariously, it can act indifferently. I genuinely think this is why true crime exists as a genre, because of incompetence of the authorities. And then they have the cheek to tell people not to speculate. We're not even allowed to talk about the mistakes that they've made. And I think in this case, just the inattention to the management of this jail breeds anger and breeds suspicion. And I think in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, what is remarkable about what happened is that you can point to all these different factors that enabled him to do it ultimately. And it's really hard to find any of those that weren't an issue at this jail way before he even came in there. I mean, it's you think someone who you think had everything, and within a month, was it? He's gone. The indifference preceded him, and he was not exempt from it, despite the fact that he's arguably the most famous and important prisoner they had there. That's right. And one of the remarkable things about the whole case is that, in a weird way, his death sort of brought this all to light, the chronic failures of the institution, things that people much less famous than him had been enduring for years. And yeah, the facility is now closed down. Not long after this happened, in part because of all the chronic problems there. Well, also because it contributes to the cover up, the fact that it's no longer doesn't exist anymore, so they can't do any more analysis over it. There was documented concern from the Bureau of Prisons that people who were working and staying in this jail were actually at risk on account of its crumbling infrastructure, just very basic issues. And one thing those issues have done now, in retrospect, has really robbed us of closure in this very important case, and really ensured that questions about this are going to persist, no matter how much we do to try and come up with an answer of what actually happened. So there you go. That is the report, or the reporter, I should say, speaking on a podcast, telling his own account of what they found out investigating Jeffrey Epstein's death. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with the video, because I know that I think YouTube has made the video only available to people over 18. So yeah, I'm going to make a recording of it, and I may edit it and re-upload it so that I don't lose it. Okay, I accidentally locked myself out. Yes, thank you very much for joining me. I know it was a bit heavy. I'm literally sweating as well. It's so hot. So apologies, I've had to keep wiping my brow. I will see you all very soon. Thank you and good night. Let me know what you think in the comments as well.